Good morning, everyone. Candice Malcolm is tweeting, quote, "How come the left is allowed to demonize the Koch brothers and condemn any politician who's ever met with them? But if a conservative makes verbatim the same critique about George Soros, it's because they're racist. And not just racist, they're anti-Semitic, a very specific kind of racism." So that's interesting to note. And she's responding to a tweet stream, a tweet thread we'll look at in a little while. This is from Charles Adler, and he's talking about Carrie Lynn Finley's tweet from yesterday, and I've got the tweet here. I said yesterday I was kicking myself for not screen capping it, and they did screen cap it. Apparently it's actually still up, I think. But Carrie Lynn Finley tweeted, "This is George Soros with Canada's new finance minister a few years ago, listening carefully to him like a student to a teacher. The closeness of these two should alarm every Canadian." And if you haven't watched the video, I think the video itself in the tweet got removed. I don't know. But you can still find the video online. There it is. And watching the two of them, they look close. They look close. There's no other way to say it. And so that's interesting to note. She's the finance minister and she's the deputy prime minister. And, well, Mr. Soros is a billionaire hedge fund manager who purposely destroyed the pound sterling and remade the Ukraine in 1991, from what I've read from Amazing Polly. Watch that video. I linked to it yesterday. So that's concerning and should be concerning to every Canadian, says MP Miss Finley, right? MP Finley. And yeah, here's Mark Patron, and he says, "Did newly installed Conservative Party leader Aaron O'Toole force Conservative MP Carrie Lynn Finley to apologize for sharing an interview Chrystia Freeland did with George Soros? Carrie Lynn Finley was within her right to express her opinion." Yes. And she said that it should concern everyone. And part of the pushback is that the reason she should be concerned is because Mr. Soros is Jewish. And I mentioned this yesterday on my show. And my goodness, that's one deep hole to dive into if you want to dive into it. That's not in the scope of this podcast. You can read up on that on your own. But I think that it's interesting because a long-standing friendship with a billionaire hedge fund manager is much more concerning than a religious affiliation, in my opinion. This person's got a history, Mr. Soros has a history of breaking currencies. He's got a history of using manipulative tactics to like puppet people, right? This is a marionette, if you don't know what I'm doing with my hands. But regardless, that he's got a history of that, a proven history. You can check out the Wikipedia page. It talks about him thinking that the UK didn't belong in a certain monetary regulatory system, and so he decided to break the currency. And I am not a finance guy. I'm sure I'm getting things wrong about this. So get a second opinion with regards to the finance stuff. Look into it for yourself. I think that there's way, way more red flags aside from a religion for George Soros than to just dismiss this as an anti-Semitic smear. Okay? That's the long version of this. That's the short version of this. The really long version goes into all the rest of it. But I'm not going to talk about that because that's not what this podcast is about. This is about Canada, the relationship between Mr. Soros and Ms. Freeland, and the real history Mr. Soros has being a billionaire hedge fund manager. That's important to note. Okay, here's their friendship. And this is from the Niagara Independent. I don't know the pedigree of this paper, but they seem independent because it says independent in the name. Okay, here it is. Another of Soros' pieces adorning a key square on the Ottawa chessboard is Deputy Prime Minister, aka Minister of Everything, Chrystia Freeland. This is a personal friendship between George Soros and Freeland that goes back over a decade when she was a journalist covering European politics and chasing after the uber rich. In a 2011 article entitled "Rise of the New Global Elite," Freeland describes Soros as a good technocratic, friendly plurocrat. How nice. In another article in 2012, she gushes over him. Quote, "Soros is a more narrowly focused hedgehog." Yep. He has been pondering, articulating, elaborating, and publicizing variations on one big idea for more than half a century. George Soros enjoys Freeland's adorations, and their friendship flourished. So much so that when Freeland was unemployed in the mid-2010s, he asked his friend to write his biography. Soros commissioned Freeland to be his scribe before she moved back to Canada to run for parliament in the 2015 election. That's interesting. And Miss Freeland is, this is published in, when was this published? 2017. Freeland knew her grandfather was an editor of a Nazi newspaper, says the Globe and Mail. This is published under the politics thing. I'm not going to go through this. opening of the article says, Foreign Affairs Minister, now Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Everything, Chrystia Freeland, knew for more than 2 decades that her maternal Ukrainian grandfather was the chief editor of a Nazi newspaper in occupied Poland that vilified Jews during the Second World War. Wow. Isn't that great? Don't you just... Can't you wait until Justin steps down? And who do you think would step in as the heir apparent, the leader who would most obviously step into the role of prime minister were Justin to, for any reason, step down? He was sick of it. He wanted to spend time with his family. Whatever reason could potentially take Justin Trudeau out of the equation. Who would step in? Oh, Miss Freeland, right? Like Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister, Minister of Everything. Might as well take it all over, right? Is everybody else comfortable with this? Because I'm not very comfortable with this. Not comfortable with the way they're taking the country. Not comfortable with their financial reset. We'll get to that at the end of the show. Not comfortable with anything. Not anything that they're doing at all. All of it is terrible. All of it. All of it. And yeah, awful. Here's Paula Simons, and she is an independent senator from Alberta, and she says, aren't we lucky to live in a time and place where a successful Canadian woman can be smeared as a Nazi sympathizer and party to an international Jewish conspiracy in the same week? Now that's range. I think that it's interesting, her take on this, right? Like taking all of the responsibility and the history and all of the things that are known, can be Googled, verified easily, and throwing it out the window and saying she's being smeared. She's not being smeared. These are facts. These are facts. Now, the Niagara Independent, that's a real picture. I don't know if these are facts. It seems like a little bit of speculation, although they're referencing articles, and I don't know if they're linking to the articles. It looks like they're linking to the articles. So linking to the articles that have these kind of quotes, that indicates a friendship, right? I wouldn't say that's ironclad, but that indicates that there's at least a mutual respect there. I don't know if they're on each other's starred contacts, right? Like, I don't know that, but it implies that he would be able to contact her to ask her to write his autobiography. So that implies an ability to contact. So this person is just deciding to take at face value whatever interpretation she's made in her head, and facts be darned. And, saying that Miss Freeland's being smeared? Hardly. She's related to a Nazi propagandist. Like it's her grandfather. I remember my grandfather very clearly. Very clearly. Here's Miss McKenna. She's the former climate minister and current loser of 20,000 projects and billions of dollars. Where's the money, Catherine? She says, worth reading Charles Adler's very personal tweets. It's one thing for politicians to disagree on policy. It's quite another to spread anti-Semitism, hate, and conspiracy theories. Isn't it, though? Here's Senator Linda Frum, just before we get to Adler. And she says, Liberals increased the funding to UNRWA to $110 million. UNRWA glorifies the killing of Jews and is one of the most virulently anti-Semitic organizations in the world. Think of that when you read protestations against the anti-Semitisms by the Liberal cabinet members today, because that's the line they've been fed to use. That's what they've been told to say. Make no mistake, okay? And that's what she's saying. Adler goes on to talk about the tweets that Miss Lynn Finley sent, and I'm just going to give you a taste of it because it's a really long, meandering piece, and it just keeps going on forever. Like seriously, Twitter's 100 or 200 and whatever characters. Get a little bit better at making your point, right? This just plods along there, Mr. Adler. Okay, he says, this was tweeted by the Conservative MP representing the South Surrey White Rock. The MP later apologized for retweeting a video on this tweet that was harvested from a hate site. Okay, they're not attacking the content. They're not attacking the relationships. They're not attacking the fact that Freeland was a reporter who had a relationship with Soros, who was going to write his autobiography. All of that's true, verifiable stuff. No. It was a video got from a hate site. Hate site, everybody. We can't have that. Don't talk about the content. Oh my goodness me. Back to this. Hardly a fulsome, unambiguous apology for composing and disseminating anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism. He got the marching orders too, right? Number 2, Pierre Poilievre, the conservative finance critic, retweeted this hateful message and has not apologized or explained. The new leader of the Conservative Party is without public comment. A spokesperson for the leader told CP that his office would not be commenting on this. Apparently, Aaron O'Toole feels the morally empty apology from the CPC MP from South Surrey White Rock is good enough for him. That's his choice. It clearly is not even close to good enough for many Canadians who are deeply about racial bans or bias in our country. Deeply something about racial bias in our country. Okay, so he's using this to basically gaslight and say this is anti-Semitic to say that there's any issue with George Soros. And anybody who does, and he basically changes parties. He says, like, I'm no longer a conservative because Aaron O'Toole failed. He backed O'Toole in the leadership race, and his leader won. And now this is the first little, and it's not even really a thing. Like, this is an MP saying, hey, you should be concerned about this. You should be concerned about this. You should be concerned about this. Call your MP. It is concerning. And rightly so. And Charles Adler, is trying to say, I'm leaving the party. I can't believe this. I'm not going to look at any data you've got there. Is that evidence? Not here, sir. It's all emotion and feeling right from here. Charles Adler. So they'll denounce this. They'll make and then denounce this crazy anti-Semitic conspiracy theory while ignoring verifiable facts, and not denounce Jagmeet Singh, who is making up anti-police conspiracy theories. Crazy stuff. So it's not okay to denounce. Hold on. Let me organize my thoughts here. So people who are rioting are peaceful protesters. Cops are the worst possible things that could possibly ever happen. Demonizing a police officer and the office of police officer and the profession of police officer, that's just fine. Saying that you should abide by the rule of law is racist. Saying that maybe you shouldn't be torching buildings and all of those other rioting things that are happening is not good. That's racist. This is the world we're living in. So Jagmeet Singh, this is Spencer Fernando, and he says NDP and establishment media refuse to denounce Jagmeet Singh's anti-police conspiracy theories. So you can't say it is concerning for the leader of our country to have a close relationship with a billionaire financier because the billionaire financier appears to be Jewish, but I don't think he's actually practicing. A bunch of people in the comment section yesterday on my video said he's not actually a practicing Jewish person. And okay, fine, whatever. I don't know much about George Soros. You have to focus on something. You can't go down every rabbit hole, okay? But if people have a problem with that, that's anti-Semitic. But you can demonize police because why is that okay? Why is this acceptable? And holding leaders of our country accountable for their choices of who they associate with when they're making choices about how the finances are going to be run in the country, that's not okay. That's anti-Semitic. But demonize those police officers, says Jagmeet Singh. Okay. Yesterday, Spencer Fernando, wrote about how Jagmeet Singh is spreading lies about the Toronto police, falsely accusing them of causing the death of Regis Korchinski-Paquette. I think that's how you say that, despite the fact that they were cleared in an investigation. And yeah, that's true. I talked about that yesterday. And Fernando draws this parallel too. He's talking about the conservative tweet, Miss Finley. It's very obvious. It's right there. And the double standard is there for you to see, but you don't see because the media purposely reports things on the slant. And I hope that you saw the slant that was being reported there. Maxime Bernier is talking about, this is in the same vein, Red Tory Aaron O'Toole is afraid of words. Systemic racism is a phony concept invented by the far left to delegitimize our history and every social institution. Despite its flaws, Canada is one of the least racist countries in the history of humanity. Yep, and here's the Global News article. Aaron O'Toole won't say whether he believes there is systemic racism in Canada. Remember when Miss Lucky went in front of the parliamentary committees and said, no, there's no racism, there's no systemic racism in the RCMP, we undertake lots of training, everything's fine. And then a week later she was saying jumping 6 feet is racist. It is racist and racist. We can't make people do that. You don't want your cops jumping 6 feet? Or your female cops jumping 6 feet? That's racist? Everybody was as confused as you are possibly right now, because jumping is clearly not racist. But that was the only example that Miss Lucky could come up with. And I still think that's funny. Okay, so Aaron O'Toole. So I think within a week, we'll see Aaron O'Toole coming up with examples of systemic racism that need to be fought against really different, really, hard. We should all mobilize like World War II and fight against this racism that's pretend, that's actually targeting, the majority population in the country. Okay. New Conservative leader Aaron O'Toole won't say whether he believes systemic racism exists in Canada amid ongoing protests and debate about the issue both here in Canada and in the United States. In an interview with West Block host Mercedes Stephenson airing Sunday, O'Toole spoke about the need to stamp out racism, but wouldn't say whether he believes systemic racism exists or how it can be defined. I'm always going to say I think there is racism and I want to stamp it out, O'Toole said. I fight for people who wear a uniform, and when you use that term like systemic, some of those people feel feel like you're calling them racist. Yeah, I think there are a lot of Canadians who feel like they're being called racist by the elite class currently. I think it's weird that O'Toole enthusiastically says, I'm always going to say I think there's racism. There's definitely racism. For sure. We just have to find it. We're going to find that racism and stamp it out. It's garbage. It's a witch hunt. Do you know what a witch hunt is? It's looking around for something that doesn't exist, wasting time and getting people whipped up into a frenzy. And then eventually you find the witch and then you toss them in the river and, they drown or they don't. But that whole witch hunt, somebody's life is impacted by these things, right? Like this is not a responsible way to be governing. Demonizing police, demonizing entire institutions. The Upper Grand District School Board is racist, supporting white supremacy, according to the Upper Grand District School Board, according to their current equity and inclusivity leads, according to their equity inclusivity policies. It's racist. It's racist. I tried to tell them that it isn't racist, but they said, no, the definition of racist is something that you don't understand. And I said, what's the definition? And they wouldn't tell me. Isn't that weird? They said, actually, it's not defined. And I said, oh, okay. So isn't that strange, right? Back to this. Quote, there's got to be a zero tolerance to racism, anti-Semitism, any form of division and intolerance. O'Toole said somebody should be able to come to Canada tomorrow and have success. If there's any barriers, if there's any racism, we're going to send a real message that there's zero tolerance. We're going to find a problem and we're going to solve it, and we're going to solve it with zero tolerance. That's worked in history. We'll do it this time too. Sir, yes, sir. Get real. It doesn't work. Morons. Like, you have to identify the problem. You have to say, this is a problem. This X thing right here is a problem. And saying that everybody's not having the same outcome, everybody's not having the same success, you can't define that problem and say that's because of racism. That's not a problem that, one, you can solve, and B, you can blame on racism. Sorry, everyone. That's a lie. That's a lie that you're being fed by the elite and the mainstream media and school boards and everyone else. Everybody's got to have the same outcome. Bullshit. It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. Oh, I started a YouTube channel, so I should be as big as Tim Pool or PewDiePie or whoever else. Yeah, that's stupid. That's moronic. I sing, so I should be as good as Sting. Sting? I don't know. Britney Spears? No. Save Britney. It's stupid. There are better singers and worse singers. There are better YouTubers and worse YouTubers. And demanding equality of outcome is asinine. It is snake oil. It is stupid. And these people should get off the idiotic bandwagon. Okay, Spencer Fernando says, I thought O'Toole would get at least 2 weeks before the media started calling the Conservatives racist, but it seems the timeline has been moved up. This is now a clear battle between truth-loving, patriotic Canadians, allied with independent media, versus the corrupt media elites. How independent? I don't know. They seem legit. Okay. John A. MacDonald statue, moving into this, there's an update, should not have been torn down and decapitated in Montreal. This was not spontaneous. It took time and planning. Why did the police not intervene? Good question. The Premier of Quebec, the Mayor of Montreal, and even the former leader of the PQ have condemned the desecration, but Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada and MP for Papineau, is still biting his lip. Hasn't said anything about the destruction of the statue, and I don't think he will. Here's Stephen Guilbeault. This is the Heritage Minister, right? I love those, a part of your Heritage minute clips. I wish those came back. This guy climbed the CN Tower for climate reasons. So, I mean, that should inform your opinion of him. Okay, here we go. Our government has always stood with those who do not have a safe space to express themselves. While the current debate is important, we believe that dialogue is a better engine for progress than isolated acts of vandalism such as we are witnessing today. Our government will continue to advocate for public places that are inclusive, safe, and free from all forms of violence or harassment. So, I mean, like, that would imply that you would stop people from committing crimes like vandalism and knocking statues down and being coordinated enough to, like, have enough people on the top to push the statue over while other people are cooperating with them, pulling the statue over from the bottom, and other people have umbrellas up to protect the people from being seen by cameras. You know, that's coordinated. That's I think there's a word for that. Some ism. I'm not sure. But you could do something about it. Especially they were all wearing, like, black bloc, and the news that I saw said they were black bloc militants. So if the news knew that, then did the police not know that? Did the police not care? Here's Pierre Poilievre, and he says an open letter from Canada's Conservatives to Mark and Craig Kielburger. Basically, the open letter says, you guys promised to give the documents that were talked about during your appearance at the Finance, what's it called? Finance Commission? Committee, that's it, Finance Committee, and we want you to give over those documents as soon as possible. Basically, you don't have to wait until September 23rd. You could give them over right now. And to no one's surprise, we says, yeah, I don't think so. Here's City News saying, we is pushing back against the Tories' request, with the organization's legal counsel saying it amounts to politics and not proper process. Yeah, well, they said we'll get those documents to you right at the end of the call, They were super sure about that, right at the end of the call, today. No problem. Yesterday, I reported, this we thing isn't going away, by the way. I think the we thing is going to continue to be a problem. If we don't, and Aaron O'Toole's, I'm going to talk about this in just a minute. Aaron O'Toole's talking about how bringing the government down in the fall is not his priority. I think if it doesn't come down in September, I think it'll come down in January. And here we go. Next question, or next one. Yesterday, I was talking about the Midtown protesters in Toronto. They want their safety back. Midtown wants their safety back. And they're whistling and stuff, right? And here is City News saying temporary Midtown Toronto homeless shelter to be vacated this week. Right now. You want your safety back? Done. So interesting. I don't know if that's going to last. There were places that had 2 years, had a 2-year contract. So yeah, I don't know if this is gonna be the end of that story, or if it's just the beginning. If it's a half measure, if it will clean up what they were complaining about. I don't know, but there you go. Here's what I was alluding to a minute ago. Conservative leader O'Toole says triggering fall election not my priority. Okay, newly elected Conservative leader Aaron O'Toole said triggering a fall election not my priority. On an episode of the West Block, O'Toole told Global News Mercedes Stephenson that he would be more focused on making sure the novel coronavirus pandemic was understood from a health perspective, creating jobs and saving small businesses as federal emergency programs wound down. We're sharpening our sword. We'll be ready to fight, but that's not my priority, he said. It's concerning to me that he's talking about the coronavirus in this way. It is, by all measures, Guelph, I think, has very few cases, under 10, under 15 certainly. I think I saw 12 was the high that I saw in the last month. And mandatory masks and all of the federal things. Now, I don't think they need increasing. I think they need managing well on the way down, because there are a lot of people who are reliant on these things. There are businesses that are reliant on these things. They've been created and they've been incentivized, so people have used them. So you can't just unplug that, right? It has to be managed well. You have to make sure the economy is being stimulated, make sure that people have money to spend, make sure that the businesses can open, make sure they can take the risk, because risk is not just about 1 month, right? It's, can you last for 3 months without, a certain level of orders or people coming in or whatever it is. There's a lot to juggle, so it has to be handled well. And talking about the health perspective, well, did you see the CDC report from yesterday? The only 6% of people died without comorbidities. 94% of people who died had other serious illnesses. So how tone deaf are our leaders? How well informed are they? Who's informing them, right? Why is the leader of the Conservative Party seem to know or be less informed than, I don't want to say me because I don't know what he knows, but seems not up to date on the most current information. How's that, right? Let's not compare to people. Let's say there's information out there that he should be aware of. Really, if you're crafting the response to a nation, you should really have people who are looking at this for you and to give you good advice, and a good cross-section of advice, not just medical advice, but how is this going to impact? What are the expected, when you incentivize something, you get it. So what are the expected outcomes of this incentive? What do we want? What's good? What's bad? How often should it be reviewed? All of these things should be, I fear they're not. I don't think they are at all. I think it's way more fly by the seat of your pants. It's frustrating. Okay. Roy Green says, in government 5 years, majority government for 4 of those 5, but now over 4 weeks, a revolutionary rewrite. 2 weeks ago, the Minister of Finance was turfed while he and Justin Trudeau, under a Conflict of Interest Act violation investigation, ended by Justin Trudeau shutting down Parliament. Moving parts, eh? So I just wanted to give you kind of an idea of the finances of this. There is talk of changing and drastically changing the direction of Canada in the throne speech coming up. And what they're talking about is well, it looks like not really dealing with the debt, just spending more. That's what it looks like. Here's Norman Levine. He says Canada's second quarter GDP loss is more severe than US, but the average Canadian thinks Justin Trudeau is doing a swell job during the pandemic. And this is the economy sees record quarterly slump. Okay. So when you're talking about the economy and the slowdowns and then also turning on the taps even more, it's concerning because, well, the finance minister doesn't have much of a finance background, and she's got that history with that big financier that I was talking about. Has nothing to do with the religion, you see. Much more problematic on the economic front. Got it? So when they talk about this big left turn and they talk about continuing the deficits, and there's Fitch and other credit agencies saying, you've got to get control of this. And the finance minister, her experience is, I met with George Soros a bunch. That's a problem. That's a problem. And it's not a problem that's going to go away easily because it's a really complicated problem to explain. Here's Paul Vieira, and he says, he's an Ottawa correspondent for the Wall Street Journal. He says former Bank of Canada Governor David Dodge is worried Canada's coming speech from the throne will, if badly managed, herald a financial crisis on par with the debt crunch in the mid-1990s that he helped fix as Deputy Prime Minister of Finance. Iveson quotes David Dodge as saying this: when they say the government has your back, that's absolute bullshit. It means future generations have the back of the people being hurt now. That's fine, but at least be honest about it. Iveson spoke to a Liberal legislator, quote, I've received 6 or 7 calls from colleagues asking me what I think about the more equitable, greener society Chrystia is talking about. I don't know what that means, nor do my colleagues, he said. Yeah, so that's a problem, you see? Has nothing to do with the religion, has everything to do with the economics of it and the closeness of it and the difficulty with which I can believe that you would put a finance minister with zero experience into that position unless somebody was, that's marionetting, right? Somebody was pulling the strings. My question isn't who's pulling the strings. My question is, why is it verboten to talk about it? Why are you not allowed to talk about it? Why, if you talk about it, do you come up with mea culpas and apologize and say, I'm really sorry. I didn't know. It was anti-Semitic of me to even suggest that they have a close relationship. Weird, right? And yet the Liberals fund? Who are these guys, right? The UNRWA, right? Isn't that weird? You're so anti-Semitic. We're just going to give these guys $110 million. Weird world we live in, right? Here was a story I didn't get to. I'm not going to talk about it, but you can check out the link in the description if you want to. Senior RCMP officials ignore warnings about alleged mole Cameron Ortis employees claim. It's an interesting story. I just don't have enough time. Thanks for watching, everybody. Check out CanadaPoly.com, check out CanadaReport.co, and have a wonderful, wonderful day.